question 71, we're told that a power station released warm water into a river, and that's an example of water pollution because of the temperature of the river was raised as a consequence. We're told that a student was interested in the effects of the temperature rise on a pollution indicator species. The student studied two graphs. On the left-hand side, there's a graph showing the oxygen required by the pollution indicator species for survival when compared to temperature, and on the right-hand side, we see how the temperature affects the total dissolved oxygen present in the river water. So, we're then told that the student wrote one of three statements, and we have to work out which is true and which is false. Okay, so before we assess the conclusions, we should first have a look at what's going on. As the temperature of the water increases, the oxygen required for survival increases for this pollution indicator species. At 5 degrees, there's only a requirement of 5 arbitrary units of oxygen, whereas at 30 there's a requirement of 45 arbitrary units of oxygen. So temperature increasing makes it harder for the pollution indicator species to survive because there's a higher oxygen demand. Okay, let's have a look at this graph. This graph suggests that as temperature increases, the dissolved oxygen in the water actually falls. So the effective temperature is twofold. Not only does it increase the oxygen demand for the pollution indicator species, but it also lowers the total oxygen present in the water in the first place. Okay, so let's have a look at those three conclusions and see which is true and which is false. The first one, as the oxygen required by the indicator species increases, the water temperature also rises. Now, what this statement is doing is reversing the independent and dependent variables. If we have a look at this graph here, it's the water temperature rising that causes the oxygen requirement increasing. So there's no impact of the oxygen requirement increasing on the temperature, it's the other way around. So we can say this is false. Let's have a look at the second statement. There is less dissolved oxygen available as the water temperature increases. Well, that's very much what this graph is indicating, so we can say this is correct because it's summarizing what's going on in this graph. As the temperature increases, the independent variable, the dependent variable, the dissolved oxygen, falls from 16 at 0 degrees to about 4 at 30 degrees. Moving on to 3, the pollution indicator species will survive better in the water at 30 degrees than at 5 degrees, we can already say this is suspect, because it has an increased oxygen uptake at 30 degrees. Now, we know this not to be the case. It's trying to trick people who have misread this graph. The oxygen requirement increases as temperature increases. The requirement heightening does not increase its chances of survival, but actually jeopardizes them, as we can see from this graph, where a concomitant increase in the temperature of the water results in lower oxygen. We can see, after about 10 degrees, the river is no longer compatible with life for the pollution indicator species because the dissolved oxygen level falls to below 10 arbitrary units, whereas the demand exceeds 10 from this point onwards. So we can say that the power plant is not doing the indicator species a favour by increasing the temperature, but actually making it worse. So we can say our answer is that only 2 is correct, therefore the answer is C.